Imagine digging through the oldest religious text in human history and finding a sentence that quietly admits something monstrous once lived among us, not as legend, not as metaphor, as fact recorded the same way as a famine or a war. The Bible calls them Nephilim, the offspring of beings who came down from the heavens and took human wives. Their bones have never been verified. Their cities, if they had any, have never been found. But almost every ancient culture on Earth seems to remember something like them. So before we go any further, ask yourself one question. What if some myths don't survive because they're imaginative? What if they survive because somewhere deep in human memory they're true? This is Mythic Origins. Today we're stepping into one of the strangest and most debated mysteries in the Bible and in ancient history, the Nephilim. This isn't a story about monsters from a fantasy world. It's a story embedded in real religious texts, repeated by people who believed they were recording history, not inventing fiction. We'll look at what the original Hebrew actually says, what the Book of Enoch claims happened in the shadow of Mount Hermon, and why giant skeletons keep showing up in old photographs, only to fall apart under real investigation. By the end, you'll understand why this story still unsettles scholars and believers alike, and why the line between legend and memory might be thinner than we think. To understand the Nephilim, we have to go back to 4 short verses in the book of Genesis, written in a language that has haunted translators for centuries. The Hebrew word is Nephilim, and scholars still argue over what it actually means. Some say it comes from Naphal, meaning to fall, suggesting beings who fell from the heavens. Others say it means those who fall upon others, a description of violence, not biology. The ancient Greek translation of the Bible, the Septuagint, didn't hesitate. It translated Nephilim as gigantes, giants. That single word choice shaped religious belief for the next 2,000 years. Genesis says that in those days, the sons of God saw the daughters of men and took them as wives. Their offspring were called mighty men, men of renown. The text is short, it offers no explanation, and that silence is exactly what has kept this mystery alive. The Bible never explains who the sons of God actually were, but an ancient text called the Book of Enoch tries to fill that silence, and what it describes is unsettling. The Book of Enoch isn't part of the official Bible for most traditions, but fragments of it were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, proof that it circulated widely in the ancient world. According to Enoch, 200 angels called Watchers descended onto Mount Hermon. They made a pact, swore an oath, and broke the boundary between heaven and earth. They married human women, and according to the text, taught them things humanity wasn't supposed to know yet: how to forge weapons of war, how to read the stars for sorcery, how to use cosmetics and ornamentation to seduce. And what those unions produced were not ordinary children. Enoch describes the Nephilim as enormous. Some manuscript versions even claim hundreds or thousands of cubits tall, numbers so extreme that ancient readers must have understood them as symbolic. But symbolic or not, what came next was disturbing. The giants grew faster than the land could feed them. They began consuming everything around them, the crops, the livestock, and eventually, according to the text, each other. Heaven, the story says, finally heard the earth crying out. This is where the story turns from myth into judgment. Genesis ties the corruption of the Nephilim directly to the decision to send the flood. The earth was filled with violence, the text says, and humanity's heart had turned dark. Outside the Bible, other ancient Near Eastern flood stories, like the Mesopotamian tale of Atrahasis, describe something similar. God's growing weary of humanity's noise and chaos, choosing to wipe the slate clean. But the biblical account is more specific. It doesn't just blame human sin in general. It blames the Nephilim's presence for tipping the world toward disaster. Whether you read this as literal history, ancient allegory, or moral warning, the message lands the same way. Something happened that made the divine decide to start over. But here's the detail that keeps theologians arguing today. After the flood wipes out nearly all life, the Nephilim are mentioned again generations later, as if they never fully disappeared. Numbers 13 describes Israelite spies returning from Canaan, terrified, reporting that the people there were descended from the Nephilim. If the flood was meant to erase them, how were their descendants still walking the earth? The Hebrew Bible doesn't mention just one giant. It describes entire giant-blooded nations living in Canaan: the Anakim, the Rephaim, the Emim. One king stands out above the rest. Og of Bashan is described in Deuteronomy as the last of the Rephaim. a giant so large that his iron bed measured roughly 13.5 feet long and 6 feet wide. To put that in perspective, an average bed for a grown man in the ancient world would have measured well under 7 feet. Og's bed was nearly double that. Even allowing for ceremonial exaggeration, the ancient writers clearly wanted readers to understand one thing. This was not a normal man. These giant clans weren't treated as myth inside the story. They were treated as a real military and political threat, formidable enough that the Israelite spies, after seeing them, lost their nerve completely. Fear of the Nephilim's descendants nearly changed the entire course of biblical history, but no giant in the Bible is more famous than Goliath of Gath. Most people know the ending. A shepherd boy named David defeats him with a sling and a single stone. Fewer people know how strange the manuscript history of his height really is. The Masoretic Hebrew text, the version most modern Bibles are based on, lists Goliath at 6 cubits and a span, somewhere around 9 feet 9 inches. But the Dead Sea Scrolls, along with early Greek translations, give a noticeably shorter height, closer to 6 feet 9. That's still imposing, but it's the height of an unusually tall man, not a mythic giant. The text adds another detail that fits either version. His armor alone is said to have weighed well over 100 pounds of bronze, the kind of weight an ordinary soldier couldn't easily carry into battle. Two ancient manuscript traditions, two very different giants. Scholars still debate which version came first, and which one was changed later to make the story more dramatic. Either way, Goliath links the legendary giants of Genesis directly to recorded history, standing on a real battlefield in a story people have repeated for 3,000 years. Here's what makes the Nephilim more than just a regional legend. Strikingly similar stories appear in cultures that had no contact with ancient Israel at all. Greek mythology describes the Gigantes, born from the blood of a wounded sky god, locked in a war against the Olympian gods. Mesopotamian legend speaks of demigod kings ruling before a great flood, a flood story that predates the biblical account by over 1,000 years. Even on the other side of the world, Native American oral traditions, including Paiute legends tied to Lovelock Cave in Nevada, describe a race of red-haired giants who warred with ordinary humans long before recorded history. Different continents, different languages, different religions. It's tempting to dismiss this as coincidence. But the more these stories repeat independently, across oceans no ancient sailor could have crossed, the harder that explanation becomes to accept. Now here's the part of this story that most retellings leave out, and it's the part that should disturb you the most. In 1869, a farmer in Cardiff, New York, claimed to have unearthed a 10-foot stone giant while digging a well. Newspapers across the country called it the discovery of the century. Crowds paid to see it. P.T. Barnum even tried to buy it. Months later, the truth came out. The Cardiff giant was a carved block of gypsum, built and buried by a man named George Hull specifically to fool the public, and it worked. Throughout the late 1800s and early 1900s, copycat stories followed. Newspapers claiming giant human skeletons dug out of the ground, sometimes 10, 12, even 18 feet tall. Photographs circulated for decades, and many people still share them today as proof. But when historians traced these images back to their source, almost every single one fell apart, the same way the Cardiff giant did. Staged with forced perspective, oversized props or simple ink on newsprint, sold to a public with no way to fact-check it. The most famous version of this legend claims the Smithsonian Institution secretly destroyed thousands of giant skeletons to protect mainstream history. There is no credible evidence this ever happened. Real excavation tells a quieter, stranger story. At Lovelock Cave in Nevada, the actual site tied to the red-haired giant legend, archaeologists did recover human remains, but they matched ordinary-sized people from the region's past. Nothing close to the towering warriors described in Paiute oral tradition. So why does any of this matter? Because the giants may never have been as physically massive as the legends claim. But the fear behind those legends was real. Across continents, ancient people kept describing violent, oversized enemies who terrorized ordinary humans before vanishing without a trace. That pattern doesn't have to mean literal giants once walked the earth. It might mean something just as unsettling. That early humans everywhere carried the memory of brutal, devastating conflict and turned that trauma into monsters. Because monsters were easier to explain than the violence other humans were capable of. Maybe that's the real mystery of the Nephilim. Not whether giants once cast shadows across the ancient world, but why nearly every civilization needed to believe they did. Perhaps the giants were never only about size. Perhaps they were about power without restraint, about beings, human or otherwise, who broke every boundary meant to protect the world from itself. And if that's true, then this story isn't locked in the past at all. It's a warning that gets retold in every generation, in different words, under different skies, waiting for someone to listen. If you want more stories from humanity's forgotten past, subscribe to Mythic Origins.